I think all the time, I'm in HEB, buying tortillas and toilet paper, and I'm standing in, a line.
The essentials.
Let's cut that out.
This will be the name of this episode, Tortillas and Toilet Paper. Thank you, Sasha.
Welcome to God Have Mercy.
Well, I am excited to almost be back for the season. John is still on vacation, and we'll be coming back to Chapel World in the next couple of days. And but so we're having a pop-up Pod Have Mercy today, and I've invited my friend Sasha Coles to be with us today. And so, Sasha, I'm just super excited that you're here and being able to have a discussion with you. I've known you for not quite 100 years, but it's been about that. I think when I moved to Houston in the 90s, you and I met each other.
Yep.
And so I would love just to hear part of your story and, who you are, what you're doing. You've been, in some ways, in certain parts of the city, you need no introduction because you've been such a force of nature of help and resource and transformation in people's lives. But for the folks that don't know you, can you tell us just a bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Well, I'm a private practice psychotherapist. My company's called The Peaceful Souls, and I've been doing that for several years. But prior to that, I ran one of the largest recovery high schools in the country, which, special enough, was located here in Houston, called Archway Academy. So I was the executive director there for 16 years. It was a high school for kids struggling with substance use issues and co-occurring mental health issues. So lots of family support, lots of kind of transforming youth mental health challenges, to a place where kids can then launch to college or launch to whatever's next. One of the most beautiful programs, in my opinion, in the city, an incredibly unique resource for the Houston community. And prior to that, I was at the Council on Recovery. So the majority of my career has been, focused on substance use, family healing, adolescence, a lot of death and dying, a lot of grief, because unfortunately with the substance use world comes relapse deaths, overdoses, suicides, things of that nature. Yeah. So a lot of supporting families walking through really hard healing journeys, whether that's the journey into recovery or sometimes the journey of loss.
Yeah. I think I met you when I was just stepping into my own recovery at Mercy Street, and our paths started to cross. And then just when you kind of stepped into Archway, I just think about the amount of students and adolescents and families that have been just deeply impacted. The alternative peer groups, the APGs, there is this kind of the cesspool-y world of people that just love each other. That place, whether it's directors or folks that are on staff for those places, that we just run into each other all the time.
Yes.
And it feels like there's a group of us that grew up together and grew each other up together.
Oh, absolutely. And, all of the ways in which our paths have crossed. So, from Mercy Street to your time at Texas Tech.
Yeah, that's right.
To your time overseas and then returning back here to Chapelwood.
Yeah, that's right. Because there was a pipeline from Archway to a lot of the centers for the study of addiction recovery. The one I was at Tech, Archway was this 6-lane highway from that to how do you get kids into healthy college experiences that don't necessitate, getting totally loaded all
Absolutely.
the time. So.
It's kind of a hallmark of the collegiate experience is, alcohol and drug use. And so it is really beautiful to have kids kind of begin their recovery journey and have that nurtured in Houston, living at home with their families in the high school world, and then have places like Texas Tech and UT Austin and places all over the country, University of Houston now, that can sort of nurture the recovery in the collegiate world.
Yeah. It was amazing because I think when part of my job when I was at Tech doing my PhD was to open up collegiate recovery communities across the country. And I think we opened in a span of about 4 years, 20 or 30 of them. And then we did our first collegiate recovery college fair at Archway. Yep. From Rutgers came down and we had, from all over the country. Kennesaw State, Georgia, all that. Yeah. So it was just, it was beautiful. And y'all hosted that. And it was just, I remember that was just a great time. It really was. So yeah. Thank you for all you've done and are doing.
Well, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for letting me walk alongside you and your family and all these journeys, all these different ways that we've been connected to each other over the last 20 years.
It's been great. How did you get into this? Like, how did you get into the counsel and recovery? Like, where does your story, if you're open, where does
absolutely.
It start?
Well, probably my story in choosing to become a therapist started when I was about 4 years old, when I started having panic attacks. So I was diagnosed with panic disorder in elementary school, and a lot of that had to come with some of the loss that my family experienced when I was a young child, and kind of me not knowing how to process that or what to do with it, not having a ton of support. Very, very loving family, but not a lot of support on how to handle a child that was having really, really big, overwhelming feelings. And so, what better way to heal myself than to become a therapist? So I decided I think there's some things I need to figure out. Like, I don't think having panic attacks in elementary school is probably going to be a great way to live long term. And so I got sober in my early 20s. That was a part of my mental health journey. Went to graduate school to become a marriage and family therapist because I think families are fascinating and complex and complicated, and we sort of ping off of each other's mental health. And so marriage and family therapy was definitely the way to go. And a lot of that was just I got a master's degree in understanding my own family and drawing more compassion and empathy for what my parents had gone through. And my mom is from Mexico City and my dad's American, and kind of the struggles that we had blending cultural values together, and kind of how that landed messy on some of us kids, and not a lot of great boundaries. And we were the stereotypical Hispanic family that had 9 cars in the driveway, and people were parked in the grass. And it was can 4 people move their car for me to get my car out? And multi-generational living, was what I grew up with. And it was beautiful, and it also came with a lot of challenges that I had to sort through and figure out as I got older. So my pull into the mental health world was primarily in trying to better understand my mental health, the mental health of my parents. How did we all end up where we were? Why did life feel so hard at certain points of my journey? Why was it that I acted out the addiction journey in my family? I'm so grateful that I got sober young. I think all the time, how beautiful it is. My son's turning 18 tomorrow, and he's never seen me put a drop of alcohol in my body. So there are many things that I learned that I learned along the way that supported my mental health. I don't think I'd be mentally well if I were still putting substances in my body. So that decision to get sober in my early 20s, plus the pain I was experiencing with my own mental health, especially in adolescence, which is why I love teens. Those were the 2 biggest drivers for me to become a therapist and get into nonprofit work.
Yeah. There are folks, you have a gift with adolescents, you have gifts across the board, but my family, in particular, kind of connecting with you over adolescence and kind of some of the struggles that we've had as a family, you have a particular gift, and there's a couple folks in the city that I call horse whisperers when it comes to adolescence, and you are one of them out of maybe 2 that I know. And can you tell me about what, number one, what kind of fascination you have towards adolescence in that way, and then also, what are some of the trends or things that you've seen because it feels in some ways we're in a crisis among our adolescents, and just if you could talk about that.
Absolutely. I think teens are some of my favorite people on the planet because they're just so raw.
Yeah, they are.
And they're in that really awkward, hard, emotional growing pain stage of life. They're approaching that quarter life crisis phase where they're trying to individuate from their family, and they don't know who they are, and they've got hormones, and they've got, sort of kind of a little bit of a skeleton of a value system or a belief system, but they don't have a fully developed brain. And, they need a lot of help.
Yeah, they do.
They're also buttholes sometimes. And
That's a clinical term too.
Yes,
isn't
it is. And so I do think they tend to be a group of people that that sort of repel help or just like
resist it.
And
Not
not a lot
boss
of people
me.
want to work with them, because they're brash and arrogant and irritated but they're also hilarious
Yeah, they
and
are.
moldable and hungry
Yeah.
for interaction and connection and lost
Yeah.
and searching and seeking.
Yeah.
And so if you have the right, if they feel a sense of respect from you, that you respect the stage of life that they're in and that you understand the chaos that they're experiencing both in their bodies and in their minds and their souls, all of a sudden, it doesn't take a lot to win them over. And then once you do, they're just like these little sponges ready to absorb. I mean, they want to hear our stories and our wisdom. They don't from their parents, but they will from other people.
That's what I found super interesting. Is like I feel like I was crushing it as a dad. Like when my boys were in elementary school.
Until they're like 12.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then you became a complete idiot.
Then it was like, what? Right. And I think that's where like folks like you and just the circle of like healthy adults that have a different language and that can speak into different places into our kids' lives are absolutely, vital.
I think adolescence is the stage where all of a sudden kids think that their parents have
Nothing to teach
nothing
them.
to give them. Yeah. Like just everything that you say is ridiculous and
Yes.
stupid and you don't know anything.
Yeah.
And so I think probably one of my greatest gifts as a parent was understanding that particular phase of adolescence. And instead of taking it, people say to me all the time, like, oh, your son must be, because now my son's
So lucky.
turning 18, like, oh, your son must be so lucky because you love teens and teens love you. And I'm like, well, that is not the case in my own home. So as soon as he got
Right?
old enough to hate me as a mother, to like resist the structure and the lessons and everything, that's when his godparents became paramount. That's when my family, my cousins, that's when, our close family friends became even more important because I knew he wouldn't hear those lessons from me. But I think because of all the work that I did with teens, I didn't take that so personal. It was almost as if I just knew I needed to be strategic with the other people who were around him that were going to teach him those lessons until he came back around again. And he's coming back around again. I feel like 18 is kind of a nice little, going into senior year of high school, like he's back to coming to me to say like, what do you think? I just texted my girlfriend, this text, like, will you read it for me and give me some feedback? Like that literally happened a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
But he wouldn't have asked me that 2 years ago.
No. As my kids have gotten older, I'm amazed at what they tell me. I never told my parents what my kids are telling me. So I feel like maybe at some level, that this kind of open connection is like paying off long term. Like one of my kids told me something a couple weeks ago and I'm like, there's no way I would have told me that. Why did you just do that? But it was such a gift, and we've had this like wonderful conversations that have come out of it. So I think some of that is having folks like you that have been in their lives, folks that have spoken in, even in this community at Chapelwood, have spoken into their lives in ways that I can't, and just hanging in. It's rough.
Absolutely. And one of the things you mentioned about just in terms of like what is special or unique about what our adolescents are experiencing. I do think the drug and alcohol culture, is especially hard for them to navigate right now, especially with the vaping and like so many things that are sort of on their horizon that they're having to navigate. The other is social media and just how challenging it is for them to live in this, kind of technology-driven world where the way that they connect and interact with their peers is so different than any generation before them. And then thirdly, I think they are a community really dealing with grief and loss in a more profound way than any of us have before. Just, and it's, when we talk about grief and loss in many, many ways, the loss of people or the loss of things, I just think our adolescents are in an ever-changing landscape that they are really struggling to navigate, as are their parents.
Yeah.
So I'm seeing just a lot of unprocessed, unhealed loss these kids are struggling with.
That's one of the things I would love to talk about is this whole nature of grief and loss, because think about what we've just gone through as a city, as a state, really as a country this last month in July with the floods that happened in Kirk County and just the number of deaths, particularly the children at Mystic and other camps surrounding that, and the way that is. I think one of the things that took me by surprise is just the way that we are all connected, just a degree of separation away, from a collection of kids. Like our lives are bound up together, and the way also that this exposed other, as you say, unprocessed. One of the ways that I talk about this is unshepherded grief. We just don't know what to do with it. And so I think you're right in terms of adolescents that they are grieving, whether it's coming out of the pandemic, whether it's whatever those things are. There's just a deep loss that we have. And we don't have places within our culture that help us through that, And so we come up to a place like the floods that happen in Kirk County or a death that happens in our family. And often our culture we don't have rituals, we don't have process.
We don't know how to be together in community with
Yeah.
each other. We don't know what grieving alone looks like. We don't know what holding space for others looks like in hard times. We're afraid to reach out. I mean, I can't tell you how many people have come to me in the last month, saying like, my best friend lost her daughter in that flood and I have no idea what to say or what to do. Like, I know I'm going to send a casserole. Like that's like the whole, outside of that. I mean, people are so afraid to touch it.
Yeah.
They don't feel a sense of confidence, or they're completely disconnected to their intuition about how they're supposed to be when loss happens.
Yeah, that's really
they don't feel like they have a roadmap. They don't know who to go to. They feel so overwhelmed by it that it's easy to just fill life with distraction and think I'll send that text tomorrow. Or a lot of that happened, especially over this last month. And I think because of the Kerr County floods, it was like the compiling just it's like this almost like the sedimentary layering of the hardship and like it happened, and then how many bodies are being recovered and who's still lost and who are these families and who lost who, and I think people got really overwhelmed and oversaturated with the news that was coming out about it. And so we were sort of glued to our phones and glued to social media, hoping to hear good news. And then many people just started to numb out. They started to numb out with alcohol. They started to, just numb out with, television. We stopped doing all the good things, all the self-care things that we would typically do for ourselves, and just sort of lost ourselves in the fog of all of that. It was really hard. Like even as a person, even as a mental health clinician, I made a commitment like 4 days after the flood that I just couldn't look at social media anymore. So I made a commitment that I would look twice a day for information. And there were 2 sources that I went to. And outside of that, it was destroying my mental health to stay every day, all day, kind of locked into the unknowing.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I think you had talked about grief as sedimentary, these layers that we have. And often I have realized that the way I've felt is that like I've got this garage inside of me that has this like grief that hasn't like been able to be expressed. And when something happens culturally, it seems like that in America, there's at times we're given grand permission to grieve, so the loss of these children, grand permission. And I realize that like I feel profound sadness over all of this. And it's also connected to other sadnesses that I carry inside of me that,
Yeah, some that may be very old.
Oh, yeah. Like, what is that?
I mean, I think every time a new loss happens, whether it's, the loss through something like divorce or, a diagnosis, or bereavement, which is the loss of a person through death, I think we are given another opportunity. It's like God grants us another opportunity to sort through things that we have yet to look at, that we either didn't have the courage or the capacity to look at before. You know, a lot of people are confused by some concepts of grief. You know, a lot of people think grief is a linear process that sort of starts with shock and denial, and then it ends with acceptance. And then there's all this ugly, messy stuff in between. And then the goal is just to get to the finish line of acceptance.
Closure.
Yes.
What we need is closure.
And that, so because we'd like to be done with it, you know, we'd like to just,
right.
we'd like to wrap it up and stick it on a shelf and just, you know, never feel it again. But grief is not a linear process. It is a very messy, detouring roadmap of, you know, sometimes really hard feelings that don't happen in a linear way. So many people don't experience shock and denial at first. Some people go straight to anger or bargaining or depression and acceptance, even when we sort of come to that kind of more beautiful part of the grief process. It doesn't mean that we don't sort of start over again in new ways with other parts of the grief process. Yeah. So, you know, I do think a lot of either misunderstanding or lack of understanding about what happens to us emotionally, spiritually when we grieve is a big part of why we're struggling as a community, because we don't know what's happening. We don't understand it. We don't know how to speak to each other about it. Yeah. And we are lacking a lot of rituals and ceremonies that help to mark things. I think, you know, with Kerr County, there were a lot of things that people decided to do, whether it was like wrapping the green ribbons around their trees, you know, things that sort of the community started to pick up as little things that we could do to acknowledge it and to remember, you know, writing stories about the people who had passed and emailing them to family or posting them on social media. I mean, I think people are searching for things to do with all of this energy that they have when grieving. We haven't given people a lot of outlets. So they don't know what to do. So they typically store it in a garage, in an emotional garage.
So that's not healthy?
And they let they just let it mildew. Let it mildew, collect a little dust and some spiders and
wait for the spark till it all goes up in flames.
Yeah,
Why am I so angry or depressed?
Yeah, and wait for the next loss to come, you know, that kind of cracks that open and is another invitation.
Yeah.
I do think a lot of what stirred people with the Kerr County losses was, you know, the age of the children and being able to see yourself in those families. I think that was really difficult for people. The number of losses, the fact that it happened in such a tragic, unexpected way. Sudden and unexpected losses come with their own very unique challenges, which is different than losing someone to like cancer or a terminal illness or to a car accident or something. And you know, there's the idea that grief is the process in which we hold on and let go at the same time, which is why it's so complex. Because, you know, the goal is to let go enough that we acknowledge and accept the loss, but then we hold on enough to the love that we don't feel like the person is just erased from our memory. But it's such an odd paradox, which is why it's so complex and nuanced, and we don't know what to do with it. I mean, it's really hard to say let go and hold on together.
Right. Because those are, I think about the letting go also feels like you're being swallowed by, because the love that constitutes the fabric of what it means to be alive, right? Beyond, like, I think about, you know, beyond achieving and money and all of that, like when the fabric of our life gets really granular, it really is about people. It constitutes the folks that we love and that love us, and that when that is taken suddenly or even episodically in a long term, there is a sense in which we realize that the fabric of our lives is quite fragile, and when we stand there having to have, you know, this invitation or mandate, you're going to have to let this go. It feels like, I think for some of us, that we're being swallowed by it.
100%.
And that makes us question. It makes me, let me personalize it, makes me question the concept of God that I've been given as a child and that many religious institutions perpetuate, and maybe just the one that I want, you know. It makes me question the goodness of life. It makes me, all these things that are up for grabs.
100%. And I feel like death does two things. You know, it requires us to reconcile and sort through everything that has come with the person who has died. But it also does a second thing, which is it reminds us of our own fragility.
Yeah.
And it is an invitation for many of us to pause for a second and to think, like, have I lived the life that I want to live? Like, am I the wife and the daughter and the sister and the mother that I want to be? You know, do I treat people with kindness and respect? Am I living out the value system that I think that I have? I mean, it's like an invitation to sort of do a little moral inventory again. And a lot of that comes with some of the blocks that we have for grieving. So, you know, when we talk about grieving and mourning, there are many things that block us from doing that in a way that creates peace. So some of that is like our resistance or denial to acknowledging the loss at all. Some of it is the numbing strategies that we use because it does feel like it's swallowing us. It does feel overwhelming. So then we either do that through denial, or we do that through, you know, drinking half a bottle of wine, or we do that through whatever mechanisms of numbing that we do because it feels too painful to face. And so we'd prefer to like either avoid or postpone the hard feelings by putting some kind of numbing between us and the hard of the letting go. But a lot of times it is resentment towards the person who has died, towards doctors, towards the floods, towards the political figure. I mean, but Kerr County came with so many layers of what people became really overwhelmed by.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just the deaths. It was all of the things that came with the deaths.
Yeah.
And so that blocks us from healing. All of that resentment, regret, things that we should have done or should have said or wish we would have, those are things that are an enormous part of facing our grief process and then coming to a more peaceful place with it.
That's beautiful. Yeah. It feels like that those times like expose or reveal kind of the ways that we're living that maybe we're unconscious of, right? And so there's certain beliefs that I had that, you know, that go unchecked, right? Certain understandings that if I do these things, this will be the outcome, right? And that that often I think one of the things in our culture is that we have valued at such a core part that we can control everything. You know, if I do the right things, I can be in control, and tragedy will somehow be the angel of death will pass over my family.
Absolutely.
It may hit people that I don't know in faraway lands, but I'm, you know, not here. And I think part of the depositing of that kind of loss at our doorsteps, it is, it's shocking and disturbing and disorienting, you know. And I think one of the things it does too is it, like you had said, we don't have rituals. We don't have ways of walking each other through this beyond about 2 weeks. You know, I talked to a buddy of mine recently who had a tragic loss in his life. And a month later, he's like, everybody's gone. I don't know what to do now.
It's like a fire hydrant at the beginning.
Yes.
And then a drought.
Yeah.
After a month. Yeah. Very, very overwhelming for people
Yeah.
because both don't feel good.
Yeah.
when you're mourning.
Yeah.
And then I think of, you know, different cultures or different even periods of time in our culture here in the States. You know, there used to be kind of a tradition or a ritual where if you were in mourning, you wore black for a period of time, or you even had a black veil over your face for a period of time. And I remember hearing about that for the first time and thinking, well, that's odd. And now I have so much respect for that because what it did is it signaled to everyone else that you were in profound loss.
Yeah.
So the community knew how to be with you.
Yes.
Or, you know, if you were having a hard day or driving your car too slow, or were standing in a parking lot sobbing, trying to put your groceries in, like people just sort of had an understanding because there was something about you that allowed them to just look at you physically and know that you were in mourning.
Yes.
And we've lost a lot of those sort of indicators.
Yeah.
Instead, you know, I think all the time, you know, I'm in HEB, you know, buying tortillas and toilet paper, and I'm standing in, you know, a line. We'll
The
cut,
essentials.
let's cut that.
This will be the name of this episode: Tortillas and Toilet Paper. Thank you, Sasha. I love it.
Scratch that one. I mean, that is what I bought last night. But I think about, being in the grocery store, purchasing my groceries and not knowing if of the 50 people that are in that store, how many of those people have been deeply impacted by death or loss in the last 30 days. And here we are, we're all existing in the same space, doing the same things. No clue.
Or maybe who hasn't been? Out of those 30 or 50 people that I'm walking, right? And it comes out in these it's like whack-a-mole, it comes out in the way that we cut each other off in traffic or respond to each other or, all those ways. My sister works in Austin at a Jewish community, and she's a therapist there. And I saw her a couple weeks ago, went and visited her, and we were talking particularly about grief. And she was telling me about just the profound ways that she's learning about the process that the Jewish folks grieve, and sitting Shiva, and that there's a whole year. It's a year. I guess that when a person dies, people show up at their house, but nobody can say anything. There's 24 hours of silence. And I thought that must just be about because nobody knows what to say. And I think often people say super stupid things when they don't know what to say. And here's a culture that just says, hey, let us help you be present, but not say stupid things.
Yes.
So you're going to show up. You have to show up. The community shows up, but nobody says anything. And you bring some food. Right? Because that's what, I thought,
and
brilliant.
Your presence is that sign of respect.
Right.
Your presence says everything.
Yes.
When your mouth doesn't need to say anything because you don't know what to say.
Yeah.
And what is there to say sometimes other than my heart breaks for you?
Yeah. Nicholas Waltersdorf wrote a book called The Lament of a Son. And he said when his son died early, in a mountaineering accident, and they were preparing for the funeral, people would come up to him and say, well, he's in a better place. Those, that, thank you. That's not helpful at all. And so he wondered why he got so viscerally angry at that. And he said, I'm not grieving where my son may or may not be. I'm grieving where he's not. And I think that there's cultures that have metabolized, ritualized grief in a way that ours has not or does not, that can help us.
I was meeting with a woman about 2 weeks ago who unexpectedly lost her son, tragically. And it was 2 days before they were going to do his service. And she said, I want to come to this session, and my number one goal is to figure out how to not fall apart at his service. I want to go, I want to be reverent, I want to be strong, I want to be grounded. And I remember thinking, that's an interesting, odd request for a mother who's lost a son tragically. And so much of our session was undoing this idea that she had about how she was meant to show up or what was expected of her or what a strong, faithful mother would do. And so, we talked about the concept of wailing and what does mourning really look like? And what is the purpose of her going to this ceremony for her son and holding it in the whole time she's there? She was very uncomfortable with the idea of wailing, as most people are. I mean, wailing is such an intense expression of the darkness and the depth of the pain that we're feeling. And some people do it, some people don't. Some people want to do it privately. Some people do it in community. But one thing that's been fascinating to me, the more I've learned about death and dying, because I became a certified death doula about 4 years ago as a way to kind of walk people through death. So it's very much like a birth doula. It's just supporting a person at the end of life instead of supporting a person at the beginning of life. And there are cultures where generations of the same family are in charge of mourning for a tribe or a particular community of people.
They hold a set of knowledge generationally that then becomes
that is
service
passed down
to-
family to family, that when a death happens within their community, this particular group of skilled people go to sit with the family that has experienced the loss to give them permission to mourn. And mourning is the outward expression of our grief. Sometimes it's quiet, sometimes it's big or loud. We've lost a lot of those traditions culturally here.
Yeah, we have.
We go to a lot of quiet funerals with a lot of people that are dressed up physically and very buttoned up emotionally. And we pay our respects, and we do it in ways that are very respectful and quiet, which is not what death requires of us.
Yes.
Death is messy, and, people are all over the place when they come to funerals. They're in many different stages of their own, reconciling of the passing. So I think there's something that really needs to change culturally for us, where we have a better, deeper understanding of how to be with our own grief, how to be with the grief of others. There's a theory called the ring theory that's one of my favorites. When you think about when death hits a family, there's the person who died, or the person who's been diagnosed with potentially a terminal illness, and then there's the tight circle right outside of that family. That might be the spouse or the children or the parents of, and then there's the ring outside of that and the ring outside of that. And the concept is that when loss hits or death hits a family, that everyone should be pouring comfort in, and only dumping should happen out. So, for example, we've got these, families that have been impacted by the deaths of Kirk County, but we have a lot of people who are like frustrated and angry about political decisions that were made, or about, the weather system, or about, whatever those
Flood
things
plains
are.
or whatever.
Yes.
FEMA.
And so a lot of people are dumping those irritations or frustrations or ideas into these families who do not have the capacity to handle anything other than the loss of their child, or the loss of their parent, or whoever passed in Kirk County. So the idea is that we only pour comfort in, and anything that we need to dump, that we dump out. That we dump to our therapists, or we dump to our spouses or our family, but that we don't dump into families that are grieving.
That's good. That's good.
And I think that's a huge missing piece, and comes with a lot of the kind of the unintentional stupid comments that are that are made by people.
Yeah, I also think it necessitates, or it exposes kind of an emotional intelligence that is lacking a lot of times culturally, collectively, right? And so that we want to move quickly towards whose fault was it, because it feels like judgment, shame, blame is an energy that's doing something, rather than standing in solidarity and just feeling a profound sense of powerlessness.
Absolutely.
And so I think that is something, like the process in the biblical tradition is called a lament. And so which is different than grieving and mourning. Those are grief and mourning really have to do, I think, if I'm correct about this, in that tradition, that it happens in the early days, of those kinds of things. But lament is the long road that we will be on forever when we think about the loss of this person, not as a physical thing that we can have access to today. And that all along the way there are ways of acknowledging that, bowing to that, recognizing that, lamenting that, celebrating. All of those things are together. And I think that's one of the things that the modern church has done a horrible job doing, is that we have prepared people for the afterlife and have done a crap job of preparing people for actual life. And I think that part of the call, if the church is going to have any use, and I find it to have little use in culture today, if it's going to have any use, it has to reclaim, how do we actually mourn together? How do we celebrate together? How do we prepare people for a more mature spirituality that allows them to hold, as you were saying earlier, two things can be true, right? And in the middle of that grief, where there is a necessitating, like swallowing up of just being swallowed by it and having to let go, and what do I hold on to? Those two things. We don't know how to do that.
We don't. Well, we don't have a lot of context for it. We don't have a lot of practice. We haven't done really well generation to generation of showing. We do a lot of protecting, especially our children. Like not wanting them to go to this funeral, or not want. Let's not let's whisper about it. Or have our feelings in private. And so, it was generations ago, that people died at home.
That's right.
And that everyone witnessed the passing, and that the body of the person was in the living room
on the table,
and the community came and spent time with you in your home, and that families slept in the living room with the body of the person who was deceased. And that wasn't that many generations ago that was the common practice. And now we have people dying in hospitals, and we don't want anyone
away
seeing
from
bodies, and it feels like a medical experience and not a
you can have
spiritual
two people
experience
in the room,
Yes.
right? It's like crazy what we've done. That reminds me, my grandmother told me when I was a child, I asked her, I don't know why, maybe it's because I'm morbid, but like if she had ever seen a dead body, because I think sometimes kids are like, curious about that. And she said, oh yeah, my father died, when they were on the farm, and they brought his body in and laid him on the kitchen table. And then everybody in their community came and paid respects. And I said, what do you remember about that? She said, I remember the quarters that they put on his eyes. I was like, she was a little kid remembering this about the same time I asked. She must have been about that age.
But imagine what she got to witness in her own home.
Yeah.
She got to witness people coming, and some people being stoic, and
it
some
wasn't
people
an odd
being
thing
unhinged.
For her.
And
she wasn't. This was not like, I can't believe that it was like, no, this is.
Where she wasn't talking about it like one of the greatest traumas of my life. I mean, it was just like, this is a memory I have connected to my father's passing.
Yeah, I think once we've medicalized it, we end up taking the ritual out of it.
100%.
And I think that once the church doesn't know how to deal with pain, and they put it into joy, we're going to have a celebration of life, which I think is very important. But also, we need to acknowledge also the depth of what we're losing here. We're not just celebrating this person. Like, there's a part of us that says this shouldn't be. This is out of time. Whether a person dies at 80, when do you not need your mom if they've been good? You know what I mean? There's some losses that you're ready for, maybe. But there's others like, when do you not need good people in your life? And so there's, in some ways, I think we need to reclaim how, as Ram Dass says, how do we walk each other home? How do we take each other's hand? And I've been saying more in this last month, you can lose your faith. It's okay. Just don't lose.
Not only is it okay, it may be a necessary part of the reconciling.
100%, yeah. What I'm saying is that don't lose, don't let go of the hand next to you, right? And if you let go of that hand, if somebody kind of pulls their hand away from me, I can still stand close, right? Because our faith is caught up with each other. And it's just going to be normal. We're going to lose faith. We're going to have it back. That's just a normal part of what it means to be human. It doesn't mean that you're not faithful or that God's going to give you cancer or, whatever stupid things that we have, in our brains.
It's interesting when you talk about the celebration of life. I think a lot of people show up to those things and they don't feel celebratory, but there's this forced sense of, let me put on a happy face and, cry behind my sunglasses, and I do think we've sort of lost a lot of the permissioning for grief to be the messy experience that it is.
Yeah.
And that I've experienced over and over again this tendency of folks to, send their condolences through a card or flowers or a text message or a food, and then not know how to speak to the person again, in terms of like, well, don't bring it up. Like, don't bring up the loss because it'll just be hard for them. You'll remind them that their child died. Bringing it up 6 months later will remind them that their husband died. And like, how dare you ruin their perfectly good Sunday by, telling them a story about their their deceased spouse or child. But what I'm finding is that it leaves the bereaved feeling extremely lonely and isolated because every day they wake up and their child isn't here or their husband isn't here or their mother isn't here. And so, for then people to just act as if, I sent my one condolence text message and now I'll just never speak of the deceased again, leaves the bereaved, feeling like they don't have community. They don't. One of the most powerful things that happened to me the first year that I was doing death doula work was visiting with a family where the husband had just been diagnosed with terminal cancer, and it was like rapidly happening. He had probably a week to live. Wow. Really quick onset, very aggressive. And I remember speaking to him privately, and he said, I just don't want to tell the kids, and I don't want to tell my wife what I know or what I'm feeling because I think it'll scare them. And I just want to keep the peace. And then I remember speaking to his children who were teens, and they said, we know that Dad is dying, but he doesn't talk about it, and we think it makes him uncomfortable, and so we're not going to mention it. So everyone
it's colluding in
talked
silence
to me about it, but no one spoke. And they're all living in the house together, and Dad's got hospice care at home, and everyone knows he's dying. He knows he's dying. His children, his wife know that he's dying. His neighbors know that he's dying. Nobody felt like they could speak about it because they didn't want to upset the other person. And it was finally when just when I gave permission for this family, how about we all sit down together and talk about the things you're all whispering about in corners, but no one's saying here, like at bedside. He had one of the most beautiful passings with his family present, and they started talking and crying and dreaming, and he was able to tell stories, and the kids were recording them. And I mean, it ended up being kind of one of the most beautiful passings I've ever witnessed. But then to imagine that just days before that, everyone was pretending as though death wasn't in the home. And it was right there, just staring them all in the face.
You had mentioned earlier kind of this, like we deny our intuition around kind of processes. And I think having permission to, to grieve, to talk, to like opens up what is that there's a knowing inside of us, right? That like, and I think that having rituals, having folks that can help us walk through this, gives us permission to what we know makes us more deeply human and more connected. So one of the things I'm super excited about is that we're taking a group of folks from Chapelwood to on a pilgrimage to San Miguel de Allende this year. Most of those folks have experienced some profound loss in their life along the way, and we're going to go and both participate in the Day of the Dead in Mexico, and I'm totally stoked that you're coming along with us. And but also before that, we're doing 2 seminars that we're opening up to not just to Chapelwood, but really anybody in the city or the friends of folks that would find this to be helpful. Are 2 kind of seminars or workshops around grief and loss that we're calling Darkness and Life, Light, a Pilgrimage Through Grief. And one of those dates will be on September 27th, and the other will be October, I think it's 11th. What I'm excited about that is that we'll hold space and begin to think about some rituals that we do both. What's the personal journey that I'm on that I have to do with other people? That's the 2 parts of tension, right? There's something that is deeply personal, but there's also a collective way that we can walk with each other, even if it's quietly or silently.
Absolutely.
So.
And something really beautiful about, bringing together a community of people that are all in different stages of their own loss and mourning, and, bringing them together as one collective group, because, it's really beautiful to be in a group of people who aren't afraid to talk about what's happened, who aren't afraid to talk about the hard parts and aren't afraid to speak about the memories and talk about their favorite stories. And there's something really, really profound about coming to a grief workshop or seminar or pilgrimage where the sole purpose is to talk about the things nobody really wants to talk about.
That's right. One of the things I realized, like in my mom's death, is that over time I didn't get to say her name very much anymore. And so when you're one of the gifts about having someone ask me is that, oh, I get to say her name, you know, and there's something about that name that transcends memory, and it reminds me of the things that I can never lose, right? And so the quite opposite happens. The things that I don't want to talk about end up creating these defenses of, you know, for my own life, kind of these addictive processes that are really connected to grief. But as I've gotten older and I've shared more in that tighter circle of folks around me, the things that I'm really grieving, it's actually done the quite opposite. It hasn't swallowed me. No. It's connected me. You know, I'm not saying there's not a swallowing in that descent that happens. There is. But it's not the last word, you know. So it's beautiful.
Why don't you tell us all one thing you love about your mother?
Oh, come on now. My mom, dear Lord, she was the most accepting, funny person that I've ever met. I mean, when there's one time I was just a real, I can't say it on the podcast. I was not I was being a little jerk. And she reached up and she cupped her hand on my face and just held it. And there's times I'm a 58 grown-ass man that I can feel her hand on my skin of, I got you. You're more than this. You're deeper than this. You're more than this expression. Become who you are. And I can feel that not out of a sense of shame, but out of a summoning to become. And I freaking just love that woman. So, yeah. Thanks for asking. How much I owe you now, Sasha? What about you? Who have you lost?
Oh, gosh. So many losses in my lifetime. I wear 2 rings every day. I wear 2 rings that belong to each of my grandmothers. I keep them close, and I lost them when I was 4. I have very few, like, kind of authentic memories of them, but my family has done a really beautiful job of keeping their lessons alive. So I wear their rings in remembrance of them every day, and I spin them sometimes when I'm anxious. They're very grounding for me. And I do remember one of the sweetest memories of my grandmother. She had given me fingernail polish, and I was not allowed to have fingernail polish when I was younger. And it was in the car, and I wanted to open it and paint my fingernails in my mom's Volvo station wagon. And my mom's sitting in the front, and I can see her looking at me through the rear view mirror telling me, do not do it. Do not open that fingernail polish in the car. And I will never forget my grandmother sitting in the passenger seat, and she looked back over to me and gave me that very mischievous, permissioning look.
Like, go for it, girl.
Open it. I'm here, and I'll handle her. You do
Trump
you.
Card.
Yeah. And I remember she and I just holding each other's eyes for a while, and she was looking at me like, you do it, honey. I've got your back with that. And I remember slowly opening it and painting my fingernails. Yeah. And my mom saying, I see you. I can see what you're doing. And my grandma's telling her in Spanish, like, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It's fine. She's a little girl. Let her do it. Let her do it. Yeah. But it was that smirk, that permissioning of like, this is okay. Like, it's a little mischievous.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I did not realize this. This may belie the fact that I'm a pastor, so it may be, shocking, but I didn't I went through a really hard time 3 years ago. One of my sons was just really struggling profoundly. You were deeply helpful in that time to my family. And I remember calling my spiritual director, this badass nun she's just tough. And I said to her, the thing I want most is just to talk to my mom, because I just think she'd have some wisdom, and I feel friggin' alone in all this. I was like, I'm not built for this. I'm way over my head. I'm getting swallowed, and she said, well, why don't you just talk to her? And I'm like, well, here's the clue phone. She's dead, and I heard her, she laughed at me, and she said, oh, you Protestants. And I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, you Protestants have this kind of, you shut the door and everything. And it's like us Catholics and most of the other people in the world have this deep understanding. And then she, starts using scripture on me, like that we're surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses. And that we have access, and that when you connect, it's not a seance. It's not, you're not bypassing Jesus. It's like all those ideas, like you have a relationship. And I'm like, oh, I still have this relationship that's still there. There's things that death cannot take.
Absolutely.
And if I don't grieve, I'll never get to that. If I don't walk with folks that don't let go of my hand when I have let go of God, but don't let go of me, I'll never get to that place where there is, we're ancestors. I'm surrounded by my ancestors. I'm going to be an ancestor to generations. I'm going to be an ancestor someday, And so
another
beautiful about
another big part of what comes with death and dying that I think culturally we're struggling to accept is all the mystery that comes with it. All of the visiting and the visitation and the little ways in which we are reminded of the people who we've lost. And I think it's also really important to hold space when people are in deep grief for all the things that they talk about in terms of the dreams that they have, or the ways in which they believe their loved one has spoken to them or spoken through someone to them.
Yes.
I think there's a lot of mystery that comes with, when our relationship transforms from a physical relationship we have here to this new version of a relationship. So how does that love continue just now in a new form or in a new way? Sometimes we're pretty quick to shut down when people talk about things that are sort of odd, unusual, eccentric, or a bit mysterious. So keeping the door open for that, especially when you're talking with someone who's lost a loved one, like in the last 6 months, where it tends to be the most raw or the most vivid. Yeah. Like leaving room for that mystery.
That's great. That may be a great way and a great place to end. Because I think that's right. I think leaving room for mystery is part of what we'll be heading into in the seminars. And so if there's folks in your life that you're interested, if you wanted to come along and do that, then you can find that on the Chapelwood website, or contact us at the church and we'll get you registration information. But it really will be a way that this is not going to be necessarily just a classroom setting where you're taking a bunch of notes and then, we've diagnosed grief and here it is. I mean, I really think it is a communal process in ways that we walk through, gentle, but resolutely walk through together. And so we'll be doing that. And so we're excited for you and coming along the journey with us. Michelle, my wife, who's also a therapist, will be there. And then Amanda Craig, who is a therapist as well. So we're going to create some space for this. So I'm excited. So if you want to go to chapelwood.org/thecrossing, there's a registration link there that you can sign up for the seminars. And my hope is that we'll do this every year. And I would love to take another pilgrimage to. We have like 21 folks that are coming to Mexico, and we've had to limit it. We've had more folks, and we have capacity. So hopefully next year we'll do the same. And my hope is that we are able to find like places like San Miguel and other places around the world to really, I think pilgrimage together is something. We're on a journey. Let's learn. Let's figure this stuff out, and let's walk each other home together. So we'll do that. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Matt.
I'm Matt Russell.
I'm Sasha Coles.
And this is Pod Have Mercy.